Hey guys, welcome. We're Bohemian Gents. I'm Brian.
I'm Caesar.
Today we're going to be reviewing Black Widow.
Very excited about it. Just finished watching it not that long ago, so we're pretty much going to get right into it. Honestly, we're, movie 24, 25 now at this point into the MCU. So it's kind of disappointing in the film at the end of the day that it really didn't have any substance to add to the overall content of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Is kind of really where I kind of fall on it. It's a good movie when you put it on its own, but it really didn't have like that moment where you're like, this is why this movie was made.
So there are real world reasons as to why the movie was made. You know, it's been a long time. We needed a real hero movie that people can really get behind. Something more realistic, not outer space wise. I think that's going to be a big reason as to why the movie was made. She definitely deserved the movie.
Oh, I agree. No, she was long overdue for a movie.
Yeah, so even though she hasn't been in all 25, she's been around since like the third Marvel movie.
Well, she was in the second one.
Iron Man 2.
The Hulk was first.
Yeah.
Was second. But yeah, Iron Man 2 as the assistant. So.
Yeah. So she was the recruiter from S.H.I.E.L.D. just to keep tabs on Tony. So even though she's been around for a long time, I'm happy she got her movie now. It's a little too late.
I agree. And then I believe this movie has been done for a while. They were kind of holding on to it because
for
COVID and all that stuff.
So it was supposed to release last year, and then they were like, "Oh, we're going to release it on Disney Plus." That didn't come to fruition, so they finally released it. We saw it on Friday, opening night. I was happy to see everyone back in the movie theater.
Agreed. Yes.
Packed.
Exactly.
Everyone had a good time. There wasn't this tension in the air of
I agree.
Who's wearing a mask, who's not.
Yes, I was very surprised at that. The first time out of the movie theater, and
no one was giving each other dirty looks or like stay on your side, stay on my side.
Yeah.
So that was very comforting.
It was.
For me, I've been going to the movies since everything first opened up, like maybe 8-9 months ago, and everything was spread out. There was literally nobody around you for a good, like a 9-foot diameter.
Gotcha.
So side to side in front of you, everything was spaced out, and you had to have the mask. So this was like the first true movie experience we've had in a year and a half, especially in California where things are barely getting back into the swing. So I was excited. I was really happy. That really set the tone going into the movie.
I agree. No, yeah, this is my first time going in. I had been a few months pre-pandemic. Yeah. So going close to 2 years since I was in an actual movie theater. Actually, that's not true. I went like right at the beginning of the pandemic, but
we're still a year and a half since time point.
Exactly, yeah. But kind of going back towards the movie here, in terms of like, what would you say is your favorite part of the movie? What part was like, what stood out to you?
So, I have two things that I really liked about the movie. The first is the nostalgia that the movie gave me from watching the original Bourne movies. I grew up watching those movies with my uncles and on my own.
I agreed, yes.
It just had a good, fresh feeling. I love that it didn't feel like a Marvel or Disney movie.
That's true.
For like the first 30 to 45 minutes, it just felt like an awesome action movie. It gave me Matt Damon, Tom Cruise type of vibes.
No, that is very true.
Which was really refreshing. I really liked it.
No, yeah, I agree.
But like past that and what it made me feel, I really had like a sit back and watch the choreography and the cinematography of a helicopter sequence. So there's a prison break, and Natasha, Black Widow, goes and breaks somebody out of prison. And that whole sequence of how they're using the environment, they're using practical effects and just mass choreography and obviously CGI, that whole scene, just from where it first started with comedy inside of a prison to where it ended, it was an amazing sequence that lasted about like 10 to 15 minutes, and the entire part had me hooked, laughing, and really at the edge of my seat with what sequence was going to happen next.
So I'm going to go a lot more spoiler into that scene.
Yeah.
They're breaking out Alexei from that scene. And just like how they introduced him in that scene is hilarious. Having that arm wrestling thing, I was just like that was pretty funny to me. How they're just like he's just like laughing at these guys, and it's like he's telling these stories about fighting Captain America, and like that big guy, and he's like, "You're lying."
Yeah, because the times didn't add up.
No,
It's like I
90s.
fought Captain America in 1993. He was my arch nemesis. He was stealing the ice.
And you end up with a broken hand when you tell that to Alexi.
Yes.
So that was pretty funny. I love the where I forgot what caused it, but they caused the avalanche.
She shot a bazooka.
She shoots the bazooka. She's like, I'm tired of this. Shoots the bazooka. Like it's like that was like honestly to me, Yelena was the movie's about her.
Yeah.
It really is.
Elena is flying the helicopter because Alexei is they're trying to break him out of the prison, but it's a 3-tower prison vertically.
Yeah, it's like one of those weird Russian prisons.
Yeah, it looks like an old nuclear power plant at the edge of the mountain.
Mm-hmm.
So that whole scene with him trying to go up and get out, but then all the convicts rushing as well. That whole scene was cool, but somebody's trying to shoot down the helicopter that Elena and Natasha arrive in, and she's just tired of having to just hear the impact of the bullets. She's just tired of it. Love how she puts it in autopilot.
Yeah.
Gets the bazooka, shoots it, has a sense of relief and satisfaction. Yes, I took care of it. But then the entire mountain is just dissipates into an avalanche.
That was hilarious. And then kind of touching on that, kind of my favorite part is you said you definitely get this not James Bond, but even kind of James Bond, Bourne Ultimatum type feeling. And when they go to Budapest, when she first gets there, she she walks into this house and you're like, whoa, who is she hunting?
Yeah.
And that's when they first kind of see each other again. Mm-hmm. And that whole scene with her just brings me back to that Bourne Ultimatum scene when they first get to their hotel room and the guy breaks into the window and they're just kind of fighting in there. Yeah. And it's just this isn't no space, no Marvel movie. This is a straight up action film. It's this is really entertaining. And the fact that they're doing this kind of really shook me.
It was just refreshing.
It was, yeah. It was really surprising to see that, and kind of it was nice having that different take on, a MCU movie because you really hadn't got anything that, and you really see it a lot in their shows now too. But they're really starting to branch away from what was their bread and butter and really tapping into these other things,
which can be very risky, but I think they're knocking that out of the ballpark, even with these left turns like WandaVision.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll get into that later. But yeah, I agree. I like that they're taking these new risks and these new experiences, and it's really working out for them. If it's not a 10 out of 10 with what they're trying to get at, I still give it an 8 or a 9, just in the aspect of the trials and errors that they're trying to accomplish throughout Marvel for Phase 4.
Agreed. And kind of now kind of go into the negatives of it. At least me personally, there's not one real thing that kind of I'm hey, this is where this movie failed, but it kind of really has you kind of get right into it, but it's kind of really stagnant throughout the whole way. Yeah. And that's kind of one thing where I was there was a nice little intro to get you high, but it wasn't a super super high where you're at the edge of your seat. Yeah. You're just okay, I'm entertained.
I did have a couple spots where I was lifting my head off the seat because I got really into it.
Yeah,
but I do agree that after you hit that, again, those first 30-45 minutes, there is a downhill effect, and then it's just kind of stagnant for a while, right?
I agree. No, yeah. Was there any scenes that you thought really said, hey, this is where Marvel missed the Marvel or whatever you're saying?
So I was gonna try to keep it more spoiler free. But since you blew the lid off of that, which is fine, the movies have been out a few days, so we will say that there's a spoiler. It's a spoiler review.
It is.
The scene that the two scenes really that I had a problem with are when it comes to the widows. So the rest of the agents that are trained in the Red Room, there was just back to that stall that there was no peak. There was nothing that really got you excited. It had to do with once Natasha and Elena and Alexei and Melina all get to the Red Room, you find out where it's at, and you see Dreykov, and they save the other widows. There's no real sense of like gratitude or relief or excitement.
Agreed. Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like, even on the hero side, it's like, oh, we had to do this. It wasn't something that we really wanted to do.
Agreed.
It just kind of fit the storyline
Mm-hmm.
to keep it linear. And then that scene I really didn't like. It really didn't suit the movie, I felt.
No, I agree. Kind of something that kind of comes to mind here as you're saying that is there's that scene where like Dreykov just kind of feels like he won.
Mm-hmm.
You got Natasha in the room surrounded by it was like 20 widows,
Yeah.
and they just go to town on her.
Mm-hmm.
But like if you're really paying attention, you realize that Yelena is on her way to that room with the antidote.
Yeah.
She's already defeated her foe.
Mm-hmm.
So there's real no like, oh, like Yelena's in trouble, Melina's in trouble, Natasha's in trouble. It's like, no.
Or even
they're-
Alexei.
No, yeah,
And
exactly.
he's fighting Taskmaster, which, like,
Well-
with the way this movie went, we just kind of blew over him.
Which was anticlimactic as well, because
Yeah.
they lock him in the cage, or they
Mhm.
lock him in the cell,
Yeah,
like
like-
the cage, and it's like, well, like he takes a couple punches and then nothing really happens. He
Yeah.
doesn't get his own punches. in.
They really didn't use that character to the full. Even if it wasn't to the full extent, the
Yeah.
character was in maybe 2 scenes, just more like one-on-one. There was a car chase scene. What I did like the ingenuity of kicking the door off and having that hit the mic. I like that scene.
That was pretty cool, yeah.
But
Pretty
what,
nice.
in regards to Taskmaster, like, he wasn't even in that scene, and they really didn't use him
I
in
agree.
a proper way with what that character has in its lore and how adaptive and powerful that character
could've-
could be.
No, yeah,
They left a lot on the table
I
there.
agree. Even in that first scene where he's kind of first introduced fighting Natasha on the bridge, she goes like you don't feel like Taskmaster is overpowering her.
No, yeah, she
Like
completely
she's
handles
in
her
that
own.
fight every single minute,
Yeah.
and even at the end when he gives like the definitive blow, it feels like it was intentional for her to get away.
Yeah,
Like she wanted that to
they
get away.
punched into it in a sense.
Yeah.
And even with that fight where Natasha's ambushed, she's just going back into a town in Norway where we could have seen Loki and
I know.
Thor.
I was so disappointed. Cameos in this movie are not there.
what you expected.
Exactly. No.
Even
yeah.
in the end credit scene. But she's going back into town to get petrol, gas for a generator. And all of a sudden there's this huge explosion, which I'm not gonna lie, I did kind of like jump in my seat.
No, yeah, honestly, like I was like, I thought like when I was expecting something to happen,
Yeah.
but like they had a good timing in that where it wasn't too early
And
and,
it
it wasn't too late
yeah.
where I was like, okay, now it's gonna happen in a second.
Yeah.
It was really unexpected. Where like,
Really
like oh,
caught you
really,
off
like
guard.
really here.
What
Like,
I liked about that scene is they went from a wide angle shot, they went to an overhead shot, they went to a POV shot inside of the vehicle based on the stereo, and then she's making a left turn on a bridge.
Mhm.
Once I saw the bridge, I was like, okay, that's where they're gonna have a scene kind of like in Winter Soldier off the freeway bridge,
Mhm.
where you can go vertically. But then it still caught me off guard because the way that they lead up to their stories when they're building anticipation, I think Marvel hits out of the park
Agreed.
10 out of 10 times.
No, yeah, honestly, yeah, no, yeah. There really hasn't been any like bad stories in the MCU and things like that. So, no, definitely. I mean, this kind of just touching back to what we were saying is like there's a lot of like good scenes in this movie, but none of them take you too high or too low, and that's kind of where it's just like it feels like a movie that was made to just pass the time, you know, because they're kind of in this phase here where they're working on their shows. And there's really no movies that are coming out right now. I mean, obviously we have the Spider-Man, we have Thor, and then we have the Doctor Strange movies. But if I'm not mistaken, those are still at least 6 months out. I think Spider-Man's
they're-
end of this
they're going
month, end of this year.
From August of this year to August 22, when that whole plate of like 3-4 movies are coming out.
Yeah, I think they're focused on their shows right now. And don't get me wrong, they're killing it with these shows.
Yeah.
But
For the most part, I still wasn't a huge fan of WandaVision.
we can have a conversation. I'll take WandaVision over Captain America or Falcon and the Winter Soldier
Just
every
so-
every day of the week. But no, yeah, kind of keeping it here with Black Widow. It really was a time passer, and you really get that feeling with the end credit scene that they gave you, because while the end credit scene is good, it sets up the future. It's not now. It's not, and it's like distant future. Cause
Even throughout the movie, you get that sense where, even though it's a Black Widow movie, it's not about Black Widow Natasha.
I agree.
It's about Black Widow Yelena.
I agree.
And even the whole foundation, but they really pass the baton to her. Like, here, you're gonna carry this next phase for us.
Which, like, personally, if I'm Scarlett Johansson, that would kind of piss me off, because like this movie's supposed to be about her, but walking out of that theater, that movie's about Yelena.
Yeah, but I think that with a sense of maturity and being a part of 15, 18 out of the 25 movies, I think she came to terms like, hey, my arc is over. And I think that it really is cool about Scarlett Johansson as in real life, where she's not selfish, she's not a drama queen, she's not a diva. So I think she was ready to pass the baton, especially with RDJ and Chris Evans leaving as well.
Mm-hmm.
It's really going to put a big emphasis on Chris Pratt, Chris Hemsworth,
and
to carry the original main team.
Mm-hmm.
But now we got Florence Pugh to carry, and what is Spider-Man's name? I can't remember.
Tom Holland.
Tom Holland and Florence Pugh to really carry the Young Avengers, the next Avengers, this new group, which I'm very excited to see. I was a little skeptical about this new younger group, but with what I've seen so far, I'm really excited.
Gotcha. And kind of touching on that, I really felt like this movie could have set up so much in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Like, there was a lot of like fan theories going in that there was going to be some kind of switch with Natasha and Yelena, where it was actually Yelena that dies in Endgame, where that's how they're going to keep her going on. They're going to do some kind of switch. That's why you see her wearing her vest in Infinity War and Endgame, because she's wearing. They had some kind of switch.
Yeah.
And I feel like they hinted at that.
I didn't even pick up on that. That was the vest that she was wearing in those movies.
Yeah, and so I feel like they're kind of hinting at that with they have that technology where they can swap faces.
Yeah.
So I thought they were gonna really build on that and find a way to keep her story going, because Yelena was this fun, entertaining character, and you can make that movie about her, but at the end of the day snap back and say, hey, you know what? She got her movie, and now we're also keeping Scarlett Johansson going forward with this, because now we have a way to bring her back.
Yeah.
Now we have a way to do all this and tie her in. Like, just think about the shows. Like, if she shows up in the Hawkeye show, like, whoa, you're supposed to be dead.
Yeah.
No, that's actually my sister that died. But
yeah, because now with the Time Adjustments Bureau and the way that they can use the stones to bring people back as well.
Yeah, and if you think about it,
plausible,
like throughout the whole movie, she's like, "Oh, this is not a fun way to die. This is a fun way to die." Like she has this like I'm just like I'm going to.
It's die. Like a morbidness, but it's also a like foreshadowing, future telling. So I really could have seen that.
Honestly, like me that I did dive into the fandom, like this movie had so much potential, and that's one of the reasons why it really was like a downturner at the end of the day, because nothing really came out from this movie besides them building with that end scene with Yelena. Not obviously we won't have gone spoilers, but obviously she's going to be the villain, if you want to put it, in Hawkeye, because she's going to be going after him.
I thought Jeremy Renner.
Yeah. So and I think they could. I don't know too many details about that shit, but I really think they could have done so much more with this movie, especially because it just goes flat in so many ways, with Black Widow never shining through in this movie.
Yeah.
Well,
even in that type of sense and term, I don't necessarily think that Elena would be the villain. It's just like the USA agent.
Agreed.
Or
yeah.
US agent.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
He's not necessarily a villain. Like, he had good intentions.
Agreed. Yeah.
Same thing with her. She's never done anything that she's not murdering innocent people. she was brainwashed. So again, I don't think she would be a villain, more of a anti-hero. Where
Agreed.
she's just like a bad job.
Exactly. No, I agree.
But I can definitely see her going after Hawkeye because she gets manipulated into thinking he killed her on Morgoth.
No, Volmir.
Volmir. Yes, with Red Skull. So I can definitely see her getting manipulated that way. But with the way that the shows are formatted, I can definitely see her coming to realization and joining the Young Avengers.
Agreed,
and
I think that
best
might be
option to see would be.
I agree, and I think that is going to be the final kind of outcome in that. But
she'll have that turn of events just like Natasha did from going from Soviet USSR to joining SHIELD. So I think she'll have that. I want to be a good guy. I want to turn my life around. And it's going to be easily to correlate to be like, I want to be like my sister. And if she worked for you guys, why can't I?
No, gotcha. And I think that is kind of what they're setting up. Because obviously, she's going to be an antagonist in the Hawkeye show. Like I said, I don't, like you said, she's not going to be the main villain in it either. But any kind of like final thoughts on the movie before we get into giving it a score?
So I enjoyed the movie. My view on it is I'm not sure how it's gonna really set up Phase 4. It could have a huge significance that we're just missing right now, or it really could just be like a filler movie that is meant for laughs and for you to enjoy the action sequences. I really enjoyed the movie for the good that was in it, but I think time will tell to see how significant it is in transitioning to the new movies and new shows. Because it's more real world and it doesn't really have to deal with superpowers, I think that's the one thing that could really hold it back to being on the main stage with people like Doctor Strange and Thor and Scarlet Witch. So I think we definitely got to wait and see on that. But I know there's a lot of reference points to the movie, just like the whole Vest part, and then Natasha and Clint's original stay in Budapest. So I think it's just going to be a little subtle, and it will gradually bring us along.
No, gotcha. And kind of like just touching on that, I think it's too early to tell where this movie is really going to land at the end of the day. Obviously, I kind of put it in those, right now it kind of lands in that same tier as kind of like the Ant-Man movies. Yeah. To me, where they're good movies to watch and you can have a fun time watching it, but they don't really hold a lot of significance in the MCU, especially with Ant-Man 2. Yeah. When you really think about it, Ant-Man and the Wasp was the first. Oh, sorry, no, I'm sorry. Right? No, yes, you're right, number 2. Where they're really fighting nobody. All they really had to do was say hi and problem solved, Yeah. And kind of thing. But I feel like that's a lot of with this movie here as well. They had a more of a true villain with Dreykov, but you don't really get anywhere with them. They really left that portion of the movie untouched because he kind of goes into I have spies everywhere. I'm one touch away from nuclear war, from the Eastern Economy. It's like, let's talk about that. That's pretty interesting. Where are these spies? And maybe they left it vague so that they can kind of do something with that. Yeah. I was expecting a Tony Stark cameo in this movie. Kind of watching it, I really thought he was gonna be the one that mass produced that antidote to free the widows. Yeah. And I was thinking that was gonna be a mid-credit scene or a post-credit scene. Kind of disappointed that we really didn't get any true cameos in this movie from what I was expecting, which is it's okay. It's
not there. With the red vials from the movie, I really thought we would see like a Vision or a Scarlet Witch with those vials, because that red, it's a crimson, deep scarlet.
It does, yeah. Not that
it looks like Wanda's power.
You do get that kind of vibe from it.
And since we're going with the whole mind control storyline,
true, yeah, it just kind of touches in with
what her powers, the House of Madness, and what she can really tap into.
I didn't really think about that.
Yeah, neither did I. It just came to me right now as you were talking about what you were saying. I make that correlation. I'm like, I wonder if you guys make that correlation too. Because now that I'm thinking about that, like we really could have seen a second end credit scene with Scarlett, even though she's like in a distressed spot.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a future point, or I'm not really sure where it would fit in, but something with her and some type of like mind control, and either her being a part of like using this to control more people to get more powerful, or just when she's back on the right side to help people.
I agree. And so yeah, like I said, like we're both saying, we're gonna have to find out what this movie really means here in this upcoming.
Because it really could set up a lot more, just like in Ant-Man. Like, even though it didn't have a huge significance in who the villain was, we still got like the quantum realm out of that movie, which
really set up everything from Endgame.
Infinity War and Endgame was going back in time.
Yeah.
So it might be something that's in our face that we just haven't seen yet because they haven't laid out their full story. So I would definitely say check this movie out. It's fun. Just don't expect too much all at once in regards to a true Marvel movie.
Mm-hmm.
But I really enjoyed the movie.
I did too. I think, I would definitely watch this movie again. We can kind of get into our scoring system that we're going to use to kind of, as we kind of rate movies over time, we'll kind of use this to kind of gauge movies again and again. And there's really 5 key points that we're going to focus on, and we're going to give each one a score and add it up at the end. And it's pretty simple. We kind of already touched on most of this stuff already, but we're going to go into story, the actual characters.
Correct.
Just to kind of mix in a little bit of the overall story and entertainment is the soundtrack,
Yeah, to give you a sense of how the movie felt.
Exactly. Cinematography, in terms of like scenes, like you're talking about, like how they set up the scenes at the bridge and things like that.
Yeah.
And just the overall significance of the film to a franchise or,
how it made you feel.
Just society, things like that as well. So just kind of touching on that, story, everything's on a scale of 1 to 10. What would you give it in terms of the story?
So I'll give mine story-wise a 6, just because there were some spots where the fluidity wasn't necessarily there. It's kind of anticlimactic at some points. But I give it a 6. How about you?
So I would give it a 7, just above where you are, just because I can rewatch this movie.
Yeah.
I feel like a 6 is something that I would not want to rewatch unless I'm just kind of channel flipping. Like if this movie comes on, I'm like, I'll watch that movie.
Yeah.
Because it does have enough of a steady point to it where you can be entertained watching this movie again.
Yeah.
So I decided to give it a 7. In terms of characters, though, this is where I thought the movie kind of fell flat. I gave this a 6 in terms of characters. The only true character that I feel came out of this movie is Yelena. Everybody else, I think, dramatically, not that their like acting performances were bad or anything like that, but just the characters themselves.
Like who made an impact on you?
Exactly. I just think every character under-delivered in terms of what I was expecting from them. And honestly, I wasn't expecting a lot of Yelena, and I thought, if it wasn't for her, I'd probably be giving this a 4, something like that. I think she's really giving this a good bump because, they did set up her for the future. Yeah. But what would you say in terms of characters?
So initially, I felt like I wanted to give it an 8. But the more I think about Taskmaster, Dreykov, the 2 big bads in this movie, to even call him a big bad, it doesn't fit.
Yeah.
So anyone who watches this movie, I feel you will really love Yelena, but I really love Alexei. I love the side characters, like the prison guards, just like inmates. So because of that, I'm gonna give it a 7.
Gotcha. Okay. And Alexei was great.
Yeah.
I just wish we would have gotten more of him.
Of the Crimson Dynamo.
Yeah, that was funny.
I really enjoyed each of their individual scenes, but then when they were together and he's telling her about the fishing story, the 2 of them together, I hope we get to see more of it because their chemistry as father and daughter was off the roof. I really enjoyed this. I definitely want to see that. So a 7.
Gotcha. Okay.
So the soundtrack, I'm gonna give it a 5.
Okay.
I remember the songs that were on there. You had Nirvana, which is like the biggest one that you're gonna have on there. There is another song that plays a significant role in the movie, but overall it wasn't very impactful, very lasting. By the time I left the movie, I had already forgotten what songs were played.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm gonna give it a 5. Just based on your love of music and the movie, where would you rate the soundtrack?
You know, initially I was kind of high on it just because they did have some good songs in it. You know, at the beginning they got Miss American Pie.
Yeah.
You know, you're really into it. They have a Nirvana song in there, and so
Smells Like Teen Spirit.
yeah, exactly. And so they have good songs in it. And you know, initially I was inclined to go with like a higher score because there's a lot of songs that I did resonate with and things like that. But I will say, kind of looking at it, I do think that besides those kind of 2 songs, really it kind of did maybe. There was like trying to think what else is there.
Yeah.
So I wasn't gonna give it a higher score initially, but now thinking of that, I'll probably go with the 6 in terms of the soundtrack as well.
Yeah. I think it fits. It's not that anything was really wrong with the soundtrack. It just wasn't very impactful.
I agree.
Which I expected a little more, especially with like on the heels of like Ragnarok.
No, yeah, like Ragnarok. Oh,
Like that soundtrack, I'd give it 10.
exactly.
I'd give it 10.
Well, you gotta at least remove Guardians of the Galaxy. So.
Yeah, you see the same thing. James Gunn and
Yeah.
Taika Waititi are just amazing. They're very creative. So I'd give both of those 10s. There can be a few 10s to give around, but they definitely meet that mark.
No, for sure.
The next one would be the cinematography, which I already touched on earlier. I love the way that they would, in one scene or one action sequence, you have 4 or 5 different viewpoints. An overall view, you can get a bird's eye, just the different levels that they played with. I'm really big on that. And they made you feel like you're watching this huge scene like right in front of you, and then the next cut, you're in it. So I really love the dynamic viewpoint on that. So I'm gonna give that a 9.
Okay. So in terms of your technical aspects and things like that,
Yeah.
it's Marvel. We know what we're gonna get from them.
Yeah.
They always knock it out of the park in terms of that. Kind of where I go with the cinematography is there any scenes that are just kind of stamped in your face, you know, they're stamped in your head that are just memorable, and that's how you would knock it out with the 10 or something like that. Like I think Endgame, you know, you have Iron Man with the at the very end, you know, you have a lot of those kind of iconic scenes. That to me would kind of be like a 10. So yes, their technical cinematography is outstanding, and for that reason, I still give it an 8.
Yeah.
Just doesn't really max it out because there was really no scene where that just lingers in my head.
Yeah, there's nothing that lingers, but I feel like if we're talking about it, I think if we're in the moment, like the avalanche scene, Natasha on the helicopter, the scene in Norway,
exactly.
like it's shot beautifully. The locations are always going to be top notch, so you're going to get this very beautiful aspect of color and land. But yeah, there is nothing that really made an impact, even at the final scene where the carrier is falling. Natasha's standing and looking into the distance. Even like with blood and the wind and looking majestic, it just isn't imprinted in my.
Agree. Maybe the only one that maybe is kind of there is one everyone's already seen because it's stamped all over the posters. It is in that scene when they're falling, where they have. I'm trying to think. It kind of has like a Spider-Man vibe because she's like sticking to this glass that's falling from the air, and they like her and Taskmaster are on it together. But it's like that's in the trailers. That's everywhere. So it doesn't really have
something that you saw for like 2 years because
exactly.
the movie was supposed to be released a long time ago.
Exactly. So but it's something that's like it's nothing in the movie that it's not already stamped everywhere.
Yeah,
so
that's right.
So don't get me wrong. Like you're not going to be disappointed with the scenes in this movie.
Yeah.
So I still give it an 8. And the last part, and maybe the most important one, is the significance of this film. I think I've kind of voiced how I feel and you know this could change in a few years, but as of right now, this movie is not very significant to me. I would say probably a 4. It definitely falls flat in terms of what it does for the Marvel Cinematic Universe, and just overall, bam in your face, I want to watch this movie again.
So I would give it a 5 on that ranking, just because of the potential, and that number could go up, it could go down, but right now I'm gonna give it a 5, 50-50. I know that's kind of sitting on the fence,
No,
but
no.
again, there really could be a lot that could be done with this, significance-wise. So, but as it stands right now, I'll give it a 5, just
Okay.
because my own mind as a fan and like the creative in me is like, okay, this is what I would do.
Mhm.
And Marvel hasn't disappointed me for
Agreed.
like 99% of their movies I love. So just because of that, I'll give it a 5.
Okay. So that would bring your overall score to
A 32.
32.
Yeah,
And this
32
is out of 50.
Yeah.
So this is a D movie for you. So
On the ranking, it is,
okay.
but I know I'm going to kind of contradict myself. So out of the scale, it's like a mid to high, yeah, just a mid D. But on my own personal scale, if I wasn't looking at it too harshly, and I'm just gonna pick a movie to enjoy, I'd give this movie a B. I really enjoy. It's really funny, and that's something that we kind of breezed over, but we're not really judging or scoring. But the comedy in the movie was top notch.
I agree.
Every time they pulled out a comedic show,
it definitely
it hit.
It does. It hit.
Every time, nothing fell flat. Nothing was too political. Nothing went over your head. Nothing was like easy on the table to just snatch. Everything was the comedic timing was top notch, and none of these people were comedians, which made it more impressive.
Exactly. No,
So,
I agree. Yeah. Comedy wise,
my ranking's a 32 out of 50, but I'll give this movie a B. How about you?
okay. So I'm not that far off from you. I'm at a 31. So, and I think from what we said, you do see this movie slightly better than I do.
Yeah.
So I think that kind of lines up. I think over time, a 1 point difference is going to be very significant in terms of the long-term thing. And
in terms of the end game.
Pun intended there, obviously. But I do think at the end of the day, it is a D movie, because I don't think, when I'm on Disney Plus scrolling through these movies and I have every single one at my disposal,
Yeah.
it's not going to be the first one I go to. It's not going to be the second one I go to. And ain't going to be the third or the fourth.
Yeah.
So it definitely falls in terms of that. Don't get me wrong. I'll definitely watch the movie if the opportunity's there.
Yeah.
But it's not going to be one of those movies where it's like, hey, let's watch Black Widow for Friday movie night. It'll be kind of like, oh, they're having a movie marathon. Oh,
Or if you walk in on you go to a friend's house or a family member's house and they have it, I'd definitely be inclined to just sit down and watch it.
Exactly. I'm not going to walk away from the film if it's on.
Yeah.
Which, I think if you're walking away from film, that's an F film,
Yeah.
And I think this is where it is. It's definitely a sit down and watch movie, but not go out of your way to watch.
I feel like if this movie was just an action movie on its own, similar to like Atomic Blonde or Salt with Charlize Theron and Angelina Jolie.
Okay, I've seen Salt. Yeah.
I think this movie would be ranked higher.
Agreed.
I think the thing holding it back is that we're comparing it to its peers. And it's kind of not fair to the movie itself. But when you're comparing it to Endgame and Civil War and the first Iron Man, I'm going to pick those over this. But again, if this movie was just on its own as a action movie and it didn't have the superhero title or implications, I think it'd be held in a higher regard. This is definitely my favorite female lead action movie. And there's a few out there, but this is definitely going to take the cake if someone's like, hey, I want to watch an action movie, preferably with a female lead. This is the movie I would put on for them. Even if they're not superhero fans and they're not into Marvel, I think there's a lack of Marvel enough where they'll love it and not grade it as harshly as we could potentially do.
And I think you make a valid and a strong point there, because if you do look at this movie away from the MCU, a lot of these things start going up because, just going towards the characters, because these characters fell flat in terms of the overall importance to the MCU, it really brings them down.
Yeah.
But like you said, individually, Alexei is hilarious.
Yeah.
Yelena is hilarious.
Yes.
Natasha has her moments.
She does.
Melania has her moments. So it definitely would elevate those, but I can't look at it like that because it is
A part
it
of a
is
larger.
exactly. And you know, I'll be frank. You know, if it probably wasn't part of this franchise, I probably wouldn't go watch it.
Yeah.
It would definitely have to be something that I come across
or
on a Sunday morning, you know, on TV for me to watch it. It's not something that I would be like, oh, I want to go watch that movie, you know, because you know.
And that's a give and take.
Yeah.
You're gonna be graded harsher because of who your contemporaries are. But it's also going to bring in more fans than it would on its own.
Agreed. No, agreed. But overall, you know, love this film. Any kind of final thoughts before we wrap this up?
I want to say thank you to Scarlett Johansson for being a part of our lives for the last 15 years, Marvel related. Again, she went out on top, you know, like when she leaves the series, it's going to be her, Robert Downey Jr., and Chris Evans, which built this Marvel Cinematic Universe. When I think of them, I am going to think of her. And when I think of her, I'm going to think of them. I know you're a big Robert Downey Jr. fan with Iron Man.
Agreed, yeah, Iron
And
Man.
I love Captain America. But she's going to be right there on the Mount Everest of most important. Even though she wasn't the most powerful, we didn't get as much screen time. So I really enjoyed the movie, and I want to thank her and for everything that she did in the universe.
No, I agree. No, I think right now it's hard not to have her up there. You know, if we are looking at the Mount Rushmore of things, you know, it has to be her. Obviously, you have Robert Downey Jr. You know, you can't go wrong without him. Captain America.
Yeah.
I have my own griefs with Chris Evans and Captain America, but he is a keystone character in this franchise. I think, you know, right now you have a strong debate for who's for. You might throw.
I would throw Thor.
I would say Thor.
Yeah.
I think depending on how much they do with Doctor Strange, he could
potentially
take that mantle. Obviously, Spider-Man can definitely jump into that mantle. Obviously, you know, Hawkeye. Sorry, not there, buddy.
Contention.
Not there, buddy. You know, when we're talking
The only issue I would have with your reference to Spider-Man being on the list, like, I love Spider-Man. Well, I think my first comic ever was a Spider-Man comic. But the thing is, we've had Maguire, we've had Garfield, and now we have Holland. And not only that, we have Miles Morales.
True, but I like what they're doing, where they're giving him a back seat to start him off.
Mm-hmm.
And they're kind of see how he does in more lead roles and things like that.
Yeah.
So we'll obviously see how that plays out. But you know, I think.
But the top three, I think, are set for now, as it should. There's definitely.
I agree. Yeah, I think
some room for the fourth spot.
Agreed. Obviously, we know who number one is.
Captain America. Yes.
No. But no, yeah. I mean, that pretty much wraps all my final thoughts on that. But definitely, you know, watch this movie a couple more times just to see if anything stands out. But we'll kind of see what time happens, and you know, appreciate you guys if you've made it this far. You know, like and subscribe, and hopefully you enjoy this type of content, and we have a lot more to come.